Joe. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. What? Just so we got it. 8:10. What time do you normally like to? Oh, really? 10 till?
No.
He
won't be.
His lips move. He's live.
So we got about 5 minutes.
Yeah. 30.
Well, let's start walking through it.
Mr. Neely here said, he told me, saw the article. What
Was it the current? Is it called Current? It's a
local business magazine,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And about back in the spring, I got contacted by the publishers of the Tribune and the Jeffersonville Evening News, and they said they wanted to do this magazine article on computer security, and they wanted to talk to a local expert. Well, you know, I teach a lot of this stuff, but I teach at a level that flies at about 70,000 feet because a lot of times you can't get into the heavy details. So immediately I said to the reporter, I said, we need to get Adrian on board here. And so when John called and said, could we come talk to Kiwanis, I said, well, yeah, that would be fine, but we need to get Adrian on board here because he's the guy who flies down in the grass level of this stuff and so can talk a lot of the details. We didn't quite know at what level we should talk about things, so we've got a number of slides here that are a little eclectic. We may flip through some, we may spend a lot of time, but we can stop at any time and answer questions. But we're going to talk a little bit about security related to your computing environment that you might have at your organization. There's a lot of ways that you need to be taking care of business on that, and we're just going to hit on a few. Do I need to say anything else here?
That should cover the beginning of it.
Okay.
Introduction's already taken place, so this is Joe, of course, and I'm the guy on the other side. Alright, what is the mandate of this talk? Basically, oh, Joe, you're standing in front of the camera.
Oh, yeah.
You might come over here.
Yeah, Adrian likes to record his stuff so that he can do a
Post-mortem.
Yep.
Post-mortem and post online to where I don't ever have to do it again.
Yeah.
Reviewed repeatedly, though I'm not sure why someone would want to. But alright, so given only 25 minutes, this is the mandate. What can I tell a small business so they could help the security posture? And there's going to be a lot of buts and except fors in this because in 25 minutes there's only so much you can actually cover. So let's go ahead and begin with the CIA Triad. Now this gets some laughing in the security community, but I think it's still a decent framework as far as describing things. Essentially, when you talk about security concepts, you can talk about 3 different parts of a triad. Confidentiality, this is basically who needs to know the information and keeping people who don't need to know it from knowing it. Integrity, you don't want people coming back behind and modifying things or changing your systems or changing data that might be necessary later on. And finally, availability, making sure that these services are still available and up. Something to be secure, well, I guess the only 100% secure IT system is one that's turned off and buried in concrete, and even that's debatable. But that's not very available, that's not very useful. So availability is another part. Did you have anything to say on that slide?
Oh, when he and I were going over this the other day, CIA has nothing to do with the CIA. Okay, so it's the 3 words there. It went past me on that. So
That's what they tell us.
I've
Believe what you want to believe.
I've seen the acronym put in other ways, but CIA is just the easiest way to remember the acronym. Alright, first thing we'll talk about a little bit is backups, and we'll just go cover this briefly. Not cool and sexy, but still important. Ultimately, if your data is gone, it doesn't matter if an attacker got it and destroyed it, or if it happened to be just a hard drive that crashed and you no longer have it. It's still a major issue. This goes into the whole availability part of the triad. This brings up the subject of how often should you back up, and I suppose that depends on what it's costing you and how important the data is to you. Daily, weekly, monthly backups. Now, also you want to consider things like off-site storage. It's one thing to say, yeah, I back up this server to this other server that's sitting in the same room. But if that building burns down, you're out of luck. So
if
actually,
we get a 12 inches of rain in 1 hour, which we've seen be getting more and more these days, and your basement gets flooded, and that's the other thing. It doesn't even have to burn down.
Yeah, 37 flood happens again. A lot of people in downtown New Albany might have issues. So look into off-site storage. Also, because when you're actually doing backups, make sure they're actually working. Because I've heard of many people who are using tape backup systems, then they try to recover later on.
And it's not there.
Yeah, so it's good to know that it's not working when it's not necessary to recover a backup than after it's too late. There's other ways of backing things up. Now, my personal solution for the stuff I do is I basically back up to another server and back up to another location out on the cloud or out on a web server I control. If it's information I'm not worried about keeping overly confidential. And there's various cloud providers. Cloud is just a generic term for outsourcing. You'll see a lot of other definitions for it, but the only commonality I can see in the definition cloud is someone else is in charge of it. However, if you're going to use a cloud provider, and I think there might be some lawyers in the audience, two things you definitely want to check up on is the privacy policy, making sure that your data that you supply them for backup, they're making sure it stays private, and who's liable if data is lost.
Yeah, I was just working on a document yesterday at IU Southeast where more and more it's important that we protect our students' data information. Faculty want to make use of these cloud kind of tools, and if you start having students do their work using, say, Google Docs or you creating a blog somewhere out there, and that's part of the coursework, then you start to cross that boundary as stuff that's related to students in the school and so on is now being on some third-party organizations' computers, which are open up to the entire world, and you don't know what their licensing policy is. At some point, you might get into trouble where you expose information that you're not supposed to. Yeah.
In your all's opinion, and what you're saying here, and I can't remember the name right now, there are a couple big companies that advertise all the time on the radio,
Yeah.
backup and so forth.
Right.
Are most of the providers out there good companies, solid companies that would?
I haven't researched it enough to make a strong recommendation.
Yeah, it would be real easy. IU doesn't have its own kind of cloud where I could upload documents and be able to get them from anywhere in the world. And it would be really great if they did, and it'd be really easy for me to want to buy into some of these that are out there. I'm just scared because, most of my documents don't have student-sensitive information like IDs or names or grades or what have you. But if I just get in the mode, you know what I mean? If you don't lock your front door every time you come in, and you don't know if it's locked or not. And if I get in the mode of starting to use one of those, I might slip up. So again, this document I was just reading yesterday, which came down from on high, said what we really need to do if you want to be sure that it's okay is you probably got to get the university lawyers to look at the license agreement. But the problem there is, if anybody uses things like iTunes or what have you, they're always changing their license agreement. Like once a month possibly, you might have to agree to their current license agreement, which is about yay long. And so I'm not quite sure what to tell you there. That wasn't real satisfying.
But based on what you said, Adrian, is it better to find someone that locally you trust, something like that for you?
I don't know how locally I'd want to keep it. My personal solution, the data I have backed up, the most important stuff to me personally is probably the documents I've created for my website and so forth. So my solution is fairly easy because those are actually public documents. I can back them up on both hosting provider and my local machine, maybe a couple other places.
And you're good.
And you're good. I also use a tool called Dropbox. Now, Dropbox has had security issues. One of the ones that's quick and easy to understand is they had a problem with basically people being able to log into other people's accounts without knowing the proper password there for a short time. That's an issue. And there's also some concerns about if you have a file and someone else has a file and they look like they match, it's actually only storing it once. But it's doing that based on something called hashing. Now, in a good hashing algorithm, a file is not going to hash to the same hash. Generally speaking, it's incredibly unlikely, but still possible. So there's little concerns like that. But for some lesser stuff I want to keep somewhat private but don't overly care about, I also use Dropbox, so it's synced to Dropbox's servers and all the boxes I have Dropbox on. And there's other providers who probably take security a little bit more as a focus that do similar things.
If you want to get a taste of storm stuff up in the cloud, Dropbox is a fairly easy tool to use, and it is quite convenient. I do use Dropbox. Currently, I just make sure that I only put things like I got to read technical papers all the time, and so I'll put those in the Dropbox so that then wherever I'm at, you know, if I've got a free 20 minutes to read something, I can download it off the Dropbox. I can be reading it instead of just sitting there waiting on the doctor to, you know, call me back or what have you, reading Time magazine. Yeah.
Question, okay, we're talking about make sure we can restore from backup.
Yeah. That's real important.
How do you start the restore and make sure it's not corrupting what?
You actually go through restore procedures underneath the assumption, all right, let's say that my the core place I stored the data is now toast. It's no longer there, it's no longer functioning. Do what you would do underneath a disaster situation and see if you can actually get the data back.
And that's going to depend on the system that you're using. You know, Adrian's got a PC there. I use PCs and Macs, and Mac has, Apple has this system that's fairly painless to do your backups. And I checked it maybe a month ago to make sure that I can actually get to old documents. I mean,
Well,
save documents.
In other words, are you interrogating it to see if you can find specific things?
Yep,
in
that's
it?
what I did. Is I went and looked to see.
Basically, you play make-believe and say, okay, I'll assume my data's lost,
Right.
can I recover?
And you go see if you can recover some. Now, you know, there might be, I've probably got thousands of documents in my backups. Am I going to go look and see if I can get every one? No, I'm going to, one or two, I'm going to look some that I know that I've created recently. That tells me, okay, the more recent backups have worked. And maybe I'll look for one that I know that I did years ago or a year ago or something like that. And that's what you got to do. And you probably should do it, I don't know, I maybe do it once a year at best. But yeah, this happens all the time. Oh God, thank God we got the backup. Oh my God, there's nothing there. What are we going to do? That's our whole business. I mean, where do you keep your list of all the members of your club, Kiwanis Club? Is it online?
You mentioned the CIA earlier. We're all on the list.
I have to read from here that wasn't handwritten, at least not all of it. So that's got to be an electronic file somewhere. And if you lost that piece of paper and you know your computer went down, you know, you could recover all those because you could say, well, you know, let me call Gary here, and Gary knows, and John knows, and we could eventually get it all back. But that's a lot of work, okay? And so that's one of the.
I think President of Glass is the one who's in charge.
Our computer skills were not great at the national level. We haven't been working.
So let me just tie this, and we'll get off this slide because we got a lot more. You know, we can. I figured we wouldn't get through them all, but we just had a whole bunch. One of the reasons that we put backups on here is one, it's a real important thing to do, but now it's becoming a way to do it is through the cloud. And once you start sticking it out there on somebody else's server somewhere that could be anywhere in the world, now you've opened up another opportunity for someone else to gain access to your data and do stuff with it that maybe you don't want them to. So that kind of ties into the security stuff.
Yeah. Also want to bring it up, it's incredibly important, but it's not a particularly sexy topic, but it's something that people need to keep in mind. The next thing I want to talk about is least privilege. Don't run as admin on your own machine. And if you take some Linux boxes, this is going to be running as root. Most of you were using Windows, I imagine. A lot of old software was written very badly to where it wants privileges to parts of the file system it doesn't need. So a lot of people have gotten used to running as admin. And since you're back in the old Windows 98 and before days, you pretty much had rights to write any place, anyway. So a lot of apps never got to the point where they were trying to do best practices as far as least privilege. Let's say that, for instance, you're running a machine and you're running as admin. Well, malware can get into any part of the machine. If you're not running as admin, and assuming there's not like a local exploit it's using, it mitigates the problem somewhat because then that one particular profile gets infected, but not necessarily the rest of the machine. It greatly lessens an attacker's power if the account that they happen to be trying to compromise isn't an administrator. And a lot of stuff out there is like drive-by downloads or drive-by malware where you hit a website with a insecure browser, or there happens to be a 0-day out there, something that's not patched, and you get hit. Well, if you get hit and you're running as administrator, the game is somewhat over. However, if you're not running as administrator, that malware that guy might get there via drive-by browsing won't have as much of a chance to infect you. Also, like I said before, lots of Windows software out there is badly designed to require more writes than is absolutely needed. I find this really true in business software. Another issue out there is overly permissive shares. Basically, people say, "Oh, I'm in a small office, got a small network. I'll share out this file to everybody else in the office." But do you need to share it to everybody? And what kind of accounting are you doing to make sure who can access that file and who can't? If you go to a coffee shop sometime, you can, not that I would ever do this because I'd be wrong, but if you use the tool that can scan for open file shares, you'll find people who at work or at home open up their entire C drive for the world to see. And all it takes is one person scanning the network to say, "Oh, there's all these files. I can just start copying those." Now, as far as running with least, let me just finish this one slide.
Define the term, what do you mean run as admin?
Okay, yeah, I was gonna interject here. Windows in the last 2 or 3 issues, say what, since XP, maybe it was
Well, Windows 2000, Windows
2000
NT.
XP, you could actually set up, and maybe you did this at your home if you have a Windows machine. You set up a login for your spouse, your kids, and so on. So when they come in, they can change their desktop, and they can have file folders that they store all their stuff in, and it's all on the same machine. It's just when they walk up, they log in as, mom or daughter or son or dad. Okay, so it's a login. All right, and you can do that on your own XP machine, or Windows 2000 or Windows 7 or Windows Vista. You can set these up. Now, tied to that login user ID, you can then tell Windows to give more permission or less permission to have total access to all of the machine's hardware or less access. Okay, and admin is a key word for you've got total access to everything. You can do anything you want. So what Adrian's saying here is that let's say Gary sets up his machine and he's got a login called Gary, and he sets it up to be admin. When he logs in, he can go look at any file on that machine and do anything he wants. All right. If he sets one up for his daughter, say Sandy, and Sandy's not got the full permission as an admin, then she can only look at a certain set of files.
And she can't install files.
And she
can't
can't install
program.
software.
So on my personal computer, if I have nothing but me, I'm not running admin?
You probably are actually.
Probably are, okay.
You see, the default that Windows does is admin, isn't it?
Well, so the first account created, yes.
Yeah, if yours is the only account, first account, then you're by default admin. So then the problem is that's okay. Okay.
As long as you're real careful where you go and you don't get hit by 0 days, your web
Right,
surfing
because I've
around.
had a lot of problems lately, we kept getting infected.
Yeah, and that's right. When an infection comes in, then they then can run under your login, and your login is admin. Therefore, their program can get access to anything it wants.
A better thing to do is create that first account as an admin, then use it only for installing stuff or doing certain system configuration, then never use it. Create another account while you're in this admin, just called your normal name or user, and use that for everything else, for web surfing and so forth. That way, if there happens to be a problem you get where you're web surfing around and you get hit by an exploit, hopefully you can just delete that profile, the old account, and create a new one and be done.
It's kind of like building a firewall. Okay. When you create a user of lesser power, and when they get infected, then the infection has a better chance of being contained within what that user could gain access to. And so there's your firewall.
Problem is, there's a lot of badly written applications that require admin privileges. People are used to the old Windows 95 way of doing things still. We had access to anything on the hard drive or any place in the registry. So you sometimes have to go in and hand configure rights. This is more for techie folks. The slides will be available on the irongeek.com website later on. But there's various tools to figure out where a particular exe is, or a particular program is writing files or making registry edits, and these tools will show you that. But that's a much more technical topic, and probably something you can cover in a 2-hour talk.
So one last thing there is that a lot of your software, like Microsoft Word, when you're working on a document, will create temporary files. That way, if you've had Word crash on you, while you're working, and oh my gosh, I forgot to save. But when you start it up, it says, oh, we've got this temporary file we can try to recover from. So what he's talking about here is that if you have these temporary files, they write those in other parts of your they make a they create a file on your C drive. You don't know about those. Word does. But you can bet that some hacker does. So if those end up staying in that other part of the C drive, then some hacker or some virus or whatever can go look at that stuff. And even though you think you've gotten rid of all your sensitive data, it might be still lurking in one of these temporary files. And so some of these things here can help you try to find out where those are.
But a lot of programs crash if they're trying to write someplace and they can't because you're not running as admin.
Right.
These tools allow you to figure out where it's writing to, so you can grant permissions to just that part.
So it's an amazing amount of things that where these are going on and you have no clue that, wow, I didn't know that was an issue, but it is.
Alright, password choice and reuse. Always using a unique password is going to be best. However, most people can't remember that many passwords, so they don't. At least try to keep levels and domains. For instance, different passwords for different purposes in your life, like a certain set of passwords for financial stuff, different ones for social networks like Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, etc., etc., etc. Now, users who share passwords around a company, kind of an issue there, because if you have any kind of auditing in place, how do you know who with a shared account is actually doing something? You know, admin user, everybody's admin password, how do you know who did something? So there's accountability issues there. Passphrases, now people can't easily remember short passwords that have odd characters. There's different ways of getting around this, but a better thing than just making really complex short passwords is to make fairly simple to remember long passphrases. So, I don't know, a movie quote with a couple of characters replaced, like 3's for E's or very other odds and ends. Now, I don't use those particular recommendations because there's actually people who do something called password fingerprinting, where they go, okay, I hope people use these kind of common replacements, so I'll run that through my dictionary also.
Yeah, you got to think of your own. You can't go out and use something that a lot of people use. Otherwise,
yes,
the bad guys will have thought of that and they'll be attacking that, right?
Yeah, but passphrases are going to be probably the way to go. Also, beware about storing passwords in local apps. For instance, whenever you say, yes, save my password, yes, save my password. Well, there's various tools out there that can go in and recover it. Like if you save your password in Firefox and don't have an extra master password for that, I have various tools I can go in there and just recover your passwords from Firefox for all the websites you've been visiting. But that's a big issue. Now, if you want to keep really secure and you want to have unique passwords but you can't remember them, look at a tool like KeePass. Basically, it's a password vault where you can store all your other passwords, but you use one master password to go access that. So it's kind of like keeping everything in a notepad, saying, oh, what was my password for that? And looking it up, but you have to have one master password to look at that list.
So on this one here, I think up here, this levels of domains, if you're using the same password for your email as, say, for your stock portfolio at Hilliard Lyons or what have you, that's probably not a real good idea. Okay, you need to have one.
Yeah.
More than likely, you know, unless you're real retentive about this, you probably don't go on to Hilliard Lyons or whatever your investment company is, or your bank or whatever. You don't do that every day. You do check email every day. So you want to separate those and have maybe a more stronger one, but just not one that you use the same one for. Also, people will, one other way that you can attack as an attacker is they'll look up your stuff on social networks and they'll see what your dog's name is because you've got a picture of your spouse's name, and a lot of people use those kind of things in their passwords, stuff related to their family, because they can remember, you know, my wife's birthday is whatever, I'm going to use that as my password. Well, sooner or later you can grab that kind of information, and if somebody's really trying to get into your stuff, they can use that to figure out your password. So again, if you've got separate ones, like a real ugly password, you know, complex for your financial stuff, that's going to give you another level of protection. Yeah.
Also, if you're like, let's say you're using someone else's network and they might be sniffing. Right, sniffing is basically being able to see what network traffic is going across the wire or the wireless. Let's say you're in a coffee shop and you log into some forum you like to frequent or some social networking site, and you have a password you enter. Well, if someone else is sitting there sniffing this connection, they can see what that password is. If you're using that exact same password for your financial information, and they
It's
can,
not a good deal.
yeah, not a good deal. They can figure out, well, okay, this person logged in this social network. This is their name. I can go looking around other places. What would their account be on this particular bank? Where do they work? Can I use that same password at their workplace?
Right. And that's called what, pivoting?
Well,
It's a kind of a version of that. What they'll do is
Privilege
they get access
escalation
to
after
one
patching.
thing, and they can use that to gain access to other stuff. And we're not trying to make you, paranoid here, but we're trying to make you a little bit paranoid here. The other thing on here is, like Windows Explorer, Firefox, and so on. They'll ask you, do you want to store this password so you don't have to keep typing it in every time you go to this website? Those are real handy things to do. You probably want to do those on, again, some of your lesser things that you don't care as much about if you're going to do it at all. I personally choose not to do it. Adrian says he does do it because, he just gets tired of typing some of his passwords. But he probably only does it for things like his social networks, not his financial information.
Yeah.
Okay. So when Firefox or Windows Explorer says, can I remember this for you? Be careful, because the problem is that let's say you leave that laptop where somebody happens to grab it when you're in the airport. You read about this stuff.
or you get hit by a piece of malware that decides to look at what those passwords are stored.
Right, you get a piece of malware that you happen to download, you don't know it, and it can then go through your browsers, your Internet Explorers, or your Firefox. They can look for those stored passwords, and more than likely stored with that password is information about what site you typed that password into. Once you've got both those, as an attacker, again, you can then go to the site, take this password, gain access to that stuff, get a check cut, mailed out to you, wherever you are, and there goes your 403B or whatever.
All right, patches and updates. Another thing that's not exactly a sexy topic, but probably one of the more important factors. Remember Patch Tuesday and keep it holy. Second Tuesday of the month, Microsoft releases its patches. Be a good idea to look at them and apply them then. Now, you can make that somewhat automated in modern versions of Windows. Basically say, yes, go ahead and automatically download it. And I generally haven't had problems just accepting it, saying yes, go ahead, and yes, saying that to most prompts is a bad thing. In the case of Windows updates, if you're sure it's Windows updates, generally probably a good call. However, some updates could possibly break some software. I mean, Microsoft can't test against every single possible package someone might have installed on their computer. So some admins will want to sit there and make sure that something's not going to break other parts of the system. If you have a more complex network, you might want to look into setting up a WSU server, Windows Server Update Services, and you can download that for free from that URL. Like I said before, the slides will be up on my website before awful long. And that will help you as far as being able to say, okay, these particular boxes, patch them now, let me test to see if it breaks anything. Okay, now roll it out to the rest of my network. Linux, if you're using Linux, I like apt-get. I use Debian-based Linux boxes. Apt-get just makes things really easy for updating and installing new packages. Now, a thing that bites a lot of people nowadays, Microsoft has done a pretty good job about automatic updates. There's a lot of third-party tools people install, let's say your Adobe Acrobat or your Adobe Flash, that don't automatically get patched necessarily. The way they sometimes get patched is when you install them the first time, they'll install an extra service that sits there and looks for updates, and if it sees one, it downloads them. But that extra process is running all the time on your machine, slowing things down, so some people shut that off. There's other tools that don't even have that kind of thing in place. So there's other third-party patch management solutions out there. Shavik, GFI, Landguard, and Secunia's PSI and CSI are a few examples. Now, CSI is for your network. PSI is something you run on just your local machine, and I believe it's free for home use. So for home use, I'd recommend looking at Secunia PSI. It'll scan your box and try to figure out, okay, this guy doesn't have the newest version of Acrobat, I should probably warn him about that, or he doesn't have the newest version of VLC, and I know there's a known vulnerability for that, so I should probably tell him about patching it, and it'll take care of, or at least help you along, handhold you, in downloading the updates and applying them.
Questions on this? Yeah.
Generally, you're suggesting, and I've not done this, when Microsoft says, would you like to update, or Adobe says, would you like to update, we should do that.
You do that.
So
Okay.
be somewhat aware, and it's hard for me to tell how to spot a fake.
It's better to say yes. I think what you're going to get at here is that sometimes sometimes you'll have some software that works with whatever's about to be updated, and this other software will then cease to work correctly. And then you go, oh my gosh, I really need that other piece of software today because I'm giving some kind of presentation or whatever, and then you're SOL, okay? But that doesn't happen too often.
But be sure the ones that are updating are actually Microsoft and Adobe, and it's hard for me to, with experience, it's hard for me to say how to spot a scam. See your website around and all it says, you have 50 infections, install me. Don't.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah, I learned that.
Right. No, if you do.
I recommend just shutting down the browser and starting up a new browser session. You may lose whatever tabs you have open, but so be it. Install 1AV, and we'll get into that in another slide or two.
How much time do we have left? So I'll tell folks. How much? 5 minutes. Okay. Yeah, it's general to be up to date on your patches, Windows especially, and then some of these third parties. Again, some of the attacks have been able to come through Adobe PDF files, right? There's been some through those. So if you don't update your Adobe that lets you read PDF files, it could be that you'll download a PDF and you're reading some article or whatever, and lo and behold, there might be some malware in it that's going to then infect your computer. So that's why you want to update these things.
There was a party at DEF CON, world's largest hacker convention, where you could only get in if you had like an Adobe 0 day, and they still had enough people to have a party. So
DEF CON is a conference that's out in Las Vegas every year. It just happened, a week or two ago, and you might have actually seen some articles. The CIA and NSA and all were out there recruiting these folks because our government's in need of folks who actually know how to do this, kind of stuff.
now, on the subject of antivirus and anti-malware, there's no magic bullet. If someone has a targeted attack, it's going to slip right through. Most antivirus works on signatures, so someone writes a custom piece of malware to hit you particularly, not what you can do about it. Also, if it's a brand new piece of malware, it's not necessarily going to recognize it anyway. Now,
so malware is just software, but it's intended to do something that you really don't want it to do on your machine. It might be fairly innocuous. It might be something where it's going to reformat your hard drive, or who knows something. But as Adrian's saying, it's a lot like if you know how the body recognizes viruses. It's through some kind of signature of the virus. That's the way the antivirus software works. Is that these pieces of software have a look and feel to them. If someone decides that they don't like you, okay, and they write one specifically for you, the antivirus software is probably not going to recognize that specialized piece of software. This would be probably more for an organization than an individual.
But if it's a brand new
unless
piece,
you're Warren Buffett or something like that.
if it's a brand new piece of malware, it's not going to recognize it either.
Right, that's right. It's like a new virus. It's like the new flu for this year. The old antivirus stuff that you took for last year's flu doesn't recognize the new. So that's then why you also need to buy an antivirus, anti-malware subscription, and you need to update that on a pretty regular basis. I do that.
If we have, like, I've got AVG and malware buys, how often should I go? And
Well, hopefully it's set to automatically download and do it for you.
I try to make sure mine are done at least once a week. The spouse, she doesn't have any clue, and it's okay. She doesn't need to while I'm around, but I get on her machine once a week at least, and I do updates. I do updates of this, the kind of updates, and then I do the backup.
Yeah, I'd focus more on user awareness. Don't click yes and say yes, install everything, like Comet Cursor back in the day. People install a little thing that website suggests. That's going to be a quick way to infection. Keeping things patched so you don't get hit by drive-by browser malware, that's going to be an issue. And also keeping least privilege so that if you're not running as admin, so there's a limit to what hopefully the malware can do. As far as recommendations, Microsoft Security Essentials is free, AVG is free for home use, and Malware is also free, though I'm not sure what the license is on that exactly. And Microsoft Security Essentials, I think if you have over so many machines in your business, they want you to pay. But I think for like the first 10 machines, it's free.
Yeah, I don't know.
But those are ones to look into, but keep in mind that any viruses and any malware packages are not a magic bullet.
So we got about a couple minutes left. Is there any of these slides that...
Network restrictions and firewalls. Make sure you secure your web, or you secure your wireless access point. WP Enterprise is going to be better than WPA, but WPA is going to be better than WEP, and both of those will be better than being open.
Yeah, so it used to be when you would buy your own wireless access point for your home and you set it up, a lot of times it would be open. And I don't know what it is now today, and this was the next most powerful, this is encryption, right?
Yes, web.
These are encryption, ways to encrypt your traffic. It's going over the air.
That's been horribly broken.
And this can be attacked fairly easy. In fact, they call it war driving as part of if you go out, people drive around your neighborhood. And Adrian can probably tell you the website, it'll show you.
I was doing it on my way here.
Okay, he'll show you, there's a website, it'll show you where all the wireless access points are around pretty much any major city. And you can probably even find yours on there if you've got a wireless access point in your home. You want to try to run at least at this WPA level. And if you don't know how to do that, you can probably find some YouTube instructions on how to set this stuff up. Otherwise, if you're sitting at home, and again, if you're checking your financial stuff and you're running unencrypted, then people might be able to sit out in front of your house, or your neighbor might be able to snip your traffic and
Or
see
look at
what's
your
going
boxes
on.
if you have open shares inside your network.
Right, or they can, once they get access and can hear and talk to your wireless access point, if you've got shared files, those might be visible then right out there from your driveway or your the road in front of your house.
Some people use MAC filtering where they basically say, all right, this address on this particular network card on this laptop, I'm accepting it and nothing else. Or SID cloaking where it basically says, hey, don't broadcast the name of my network. Neither of these are particularly effective because if it's any association traffic, a decent attacker can find that. It's trivial. MAC address filtering, you can set your MAC address. So they can sniff the connection, wirelessly go, oh, I know that MAC is getting on, so I'll just make my machine have that MAC address also and get on.
This is like a social security number. Every machine in the world has its own unique social security number. Only it's called a MAC address. At least it's supposed to. But you can do you can spoof it or cloak it or whatever. So you might say, well, I'm only going to allow certain computers with specific social security numbers, and I know those are MAC addresses, and I know what those are. They got to tell me first. And I type that in, and only they can talk to my machine. Well, I come along and I'm able to figure out, I don't have that MAC address, but I'm able to figure it out and tell my machine to pretend like it has that address. And so now I got access to your stuff. You thought you were protected, but you're not.
Here's why someone's going to be remoting into your machines and your business. Look and set up a VPN. I even have a VPN set up in my home. You can do this as simple as the ones built into Windows. DDWRT is a certain firmware you can put on your wireless router, even these cheap home consumer ones that can have VPN functionality built in. OpenVPN is another solution. Basically, this is an encrypted tunnel between you and your network where hopefully people can't see what you're sending.
And this would be good if if you do a lot of work at, say, Starbucks, and you are transmitting information to a machine like at your work. If you can, again, set up this VPN connection, it's a pipe through the big network that's everything that goes through it is encrypted. So if anybody happens to be trying to snip it, they're going to have to break the encryption.
The military uses that.
Yeah.
I was recently
Well,
given a military computer, and I tried to turn it on my office, and wouldn't let me go anywhere. And the guy says, you got to get the VPN.
You got to get in the
Yeah.
VPN.
Business also, a lot of people do.
Yeah. Okay, we're out of time, right? Yep. So,
Yeah, a general question. You were talking about, since you said it this morning, between Adobe and Microsoft. Here recently, someone will send me a PDF file, and I want to print the document they sent.
Yeah.
And I keep getting the message, Microsoft is not allowing this.
don't know.
I have to see the specific
Yeah.
message.
I have to
Okay,
see it.
and so I can't print.
Yeah.
So Microsoft is trying to protect you, and it's not allowing you to print this.
Send me a question, Lance.
I have no idea.
Gentlemen, we really appreciate your.
Yeah.
If anybody gets a chance that's more interested in this subject matter, there's two conferences coming up. September 29th is the Louisville InfoSec, put on by our local ISSA chapter, the Kentuckiana ISSA, and DerbyCon, which is probably the nation's fourth largest hackathon by the time we get it all together, is happening also the day after that to October 2nd.
These are real good resources. If you are part of an organization that you think is running a little bit naked out here on the information security kind of thing, you might be able to try to, you might want to talk to some of your IT people and get them to start going to these. They won't get magically imbued with all the knowledge they need to right away, but they'll start to meet people who can help get them up to speed, and maybe you might hire them as contractors to come in and help your organization get better at protecting your information. So, thanks.
Great time.